The chamber was restless, but the moment Joni Ernst rose to her feet, the air thickened. Her finger cut through the space like a blade, aimed squarely at Jasmine Crockett. Her voice cracked like thunder, echoing off the marble walls. "You are lying," she declared, each word meant to pierce, to stain, to silence. The room fell still. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned in unison. For a breathless second, even the ticking of the clock seemed to hesitate. Ernst stood tall, her jaw tight, her expression burning with the certainty of someone who believed she had cornered her opponent. This was supposed to be her moment. An attack that would weaken, expose, humiliate. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching. Staffers glanced nervously at one another, sensing the tension ripple outward. The accusation carried not just against Crockett, but against everyone who had ever dared to speak inconvenient truth. It was a weapon, sharpened by arrogance, and delivered with the confidence of a practiced performer. And yet, across the aisle, Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. She did not lower her gaze. She did not scramble for words. Her eyes held steady, unshaken, as if she had seen this moment coming long before the chamber doors even opened. The stillness in her posture was louder than Ernst's booming accusation. A calm that unsettled the arrogance hurled her way. The silence grew heavier, pressing down on everyone who witnessed it. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, the kind that makes onlookers wonder if they should brace themselves for impact. A cough from the back row echoed too loudly. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" But all attention snapped back to Jasmine, whose measured breath suggested she was holding something powerful in reserve. In that instant, Ernst thought she had won. The cameras were on her, the soundbite secured, the insult delivered. But what she did not see, what no one in that room yet understood, was the trap she had just walked into, because Jasmine Crockett was not empty-handed. She had come armed, not with slogans, but with proof. And no one in that room, not the reporters, not the staffers, not even Joni Ernst herself, was prepared for the evidence Jasmine was about to unleash. The accusation might have sounded like just another partisan jab, the kind that comes and goes in Washington with the regularity of clockwork. But this was not ordinary theatre. What played out in that chamber was something larger, something that cut to the core of what democracy itself depends upon, the fragile bond between truth and power. Joni Ernst knew this well. She hadn't built her career on deep policy debates or nuanced persuasion. She had mastered a different game. The soundbite strike, the quick deflection, the 30-second clip designed for primetime replay. It was a strategy honed in an era where perception too often outweighed substance. For Ernst, the attack wasn't about proving Crockett wrong. It was about planting a seed of doubt, a clip to circulate on partisan feeds, a headline stripped of context, but brimming with accusation. That was her weapon of choice, not truth, but spectacle. And in the past, it had worked. A sharp tone, a pointed finger, and suddenly the news cycle bent her way. But this time was different, because standing across from her was not the caricature of a freshman representative she expected, not the easy target she imagined. Jasmine Crockett had been underestimated before, dismissed, second-guessed, ignored. That underestimation had become her armor. Each slight had taught her something Ernst could never manufacture. How to remain steady when the room turns hostile, how to wield preparation as a shield, and how to transform evidence into power. Crockett wasn't just another name on the roll call. She was the embodiment of the very values Ernst's strategy tried to erode: authenticity, resilience, and the refusal to let lies stand unchallenged. That mattered not just for her reputation, but for everyone watching who had ever been told to sit down, to stay quiet, to accept falsehood spoken with confidence. And make no mistake, people were watching. Millions beyond those chamber walls were hungry for a moment when someone, anyone, would finally stand up and refuse to let arrogance rewrite reality. Social feeds were prime for outrage. Journalists' pens hovered, waiting for a spark to set off the firestorm. In that silence, the stakes weren't just Crockett's dignity, they were America's appetite for truth itself. Ernst thought she had chosen the perfect battleground, but in truth, she had handed Jasmine the stage. And Crockett, unlike her accuser, did not come empty-handed. She carried with her something more potent than a soundbite. She carried receipts, the kind of undeniable evidence that could strip Ernst's accusation bare and expose the hollow theatre beneath. The battle lines were no longer about who could speak the loudest. They were about who could anchor their words in something unshakable. Crockett's calm was not passivity. It was the confidence of someone who knew her arsenal was stronger than any insult hurled her way. Because once you see the receipts Jasmine carried into that room, you'll understand why Ernst's confidence began to crack. Joni Ernst has long sold herself as the kind of politician who doesn't back down. She burst onto the national stage with an image carefully crafted. The tough Midwestern farm girl who butchered hogs and promised to make Washington squeal. The disciplined soldier who spoke of duty, grit, and service to country. It was the brand of a fighter, straight-talking, no-nonsense, immune to the softness of political correctness. And for years, that image worked. Voters saw in her a reflection of resilience, a woman who projected strength in rooms often dominated by men. She leaned on her military background, reminding audiences that she knew sacrifice firsthand, that she was one of them, ordinary, grounded, battle-tested. To many, she seemed unshakable. But beneath the armor of that persona lay something far less solid. Because toughness on camera does not always translate to integrity when the votes are cast. Again and again, Ernst's record revealed contradictions, votes that undercut the very values she claimed to champion, decisions that place politics above people, sound bites above solutions. She spoke of defending the working class but sided with corporate tax breaks. She celebrated service but voted against measures to expand healthcare access for veterans. She championed accountability, yet shielded those in her party from scrutiny when power was at stake. It was this duality, this gap between image and action, that defined Ernst. She thrived on headlines, but wilted when confronted with details. She spoke in absolutes, but her record was riddled with compromise and inconsistency. Her persona was not built on granite, but on carefully staged optics, polished speeches, and moments engineered for television replay. And this was precisely why she leaned so heavily on the politics of deflection. When the conversation drifted toward uncomfortable truths, when voting records or broken promises threatened to pierce the image, Ernst defaulted to the strike. Attack first, accuse loudly, dominate the soundscape. In politics, silence is deadly, but noise, no matter how hollow, can drown out scrutiny. Yet that strategy also revealed her weakness. A persona built on projection cannot withstand the weight of evidence. The more she doubled down on her narrative, the more brittle it became. Behind the bravado there was fragility, the kind that cracks quickly when challenged by someone unwilling to be cowed. This fragility was on full display in the chamber that day. Ernst believed she had cornered Jasmine Crockett, that by hurling the word liar across the room, she could shatter her composure, bait her into defensive stumbling, and reclaim control of the narrative. It was a tactic Ernst had used before: strip the other side of dignity, then bask in the silence that follows. But Jasmine was not the kind of opponent Ernst was used to facing. Crockett didn't play by the old Washington script. She didn't wilt. She didn't rush. She didn't allow Ernst's thunder to shake her ground. Instead, she stood in the kind of quiet stillness that unnerved her accuser. Because calm in the face of accusation is its own kind of power. It signals preparation, confidence, the knowledge that one does not need volume to win. Ernst, however, misread the silence. She mistook composure for weakness, stillness for surrender. In her mind, she had already won. The chamber would remember her finger, her words, her fiery performance. She saw the cameras and assumed they were hers to command. What she did not realize was that she had walked directly into the one trap her strategy could never escape. Evidence. Unlike rhetoric, evidence cannot be shouted down. Unlike sound bites, it cannot be clipped and twisted without exposing its own truth. It is the one force that cracks through performance because it demands accountability. And in that chamber, Jasmine Crockett had come prepared with exactly that. Receipts, documents, proof that would strip away Ernst's accusation like smoke in a strong wind. Ernst had built her brand on projection, but Crockett carried reality in her hands. The villain in this drama was not defined by her confidence, but by her inability to withstand contradiction. And so, in reaching too far, in accusing too loudly, in underestimating the strength of her opponent, Joni Ernst made the one move that would collapse her facade. And that's when she made her fatal mistake, accusing Jasmine Crockett of something that could be proven in seconds. Long before she walked into that chamber, long before her name flashed across cable news chyrons or trended on social media, Jasmine Crockett had been fighting battles that didn't come with microphones or television cameras. She was a fighter for dignity because she had lived through indignity. She was a defender of truth because she had witnessed how lies could ruin lives. And she was a lawyer, an activist, and ultimately a representative. Not because the path was easy, but because the obstacles had forged her into someone who refused to back down. Her story did not begin with privilege. It began with persistence. As a young black woman stepping into spaces where she was often the only one who looked like her, Jasmine knew what it felt like to be underestimated. Professors and colleagues questioned her sharpness before she even opened her mouth. Clients doubted her because they had been conditioned to expect authority in a different package. In courtrooms, opposing counsel sized her up and assumed they could run circles around her. But again and again, Crockett showed that assumptions can be a dangerous gamble. She fought for those society often forgot, defendants who had no one else to stand beside them. Families steamrolled by systems too, complex to navigate, people told they didn't matter. Her practice was never glamorous, but it was grounded in service. She carried into politics the same principles she carried into court: preparation, authenticity, and the quiet conviction that truth, when wielded properly, can dismantle even the loudest of lies. But with that authenticity came struggle. Jasmine was often dismissed as too fiery, as if passion for justice were a liability. She was stereotyped, reduced to tropes meant to shrink her presence: the angry black woman, the rookie out of her depth. Headlines painted her as combative rather than courageous. Ernst and others like her thrived on such mischaracterizations, betting that audiences would accept caricature over complexity. Yet Jasmine never let those labels define her. Instead, she used them as fuel. Every dismissal became a reminder that she needed to be sharper, more prepared, more unshakable. She understood that as a woman of color in power, Her margin for error was razor thin. She could not simply be good, she had to be undeniable. That pressure was a weight, but it was also the crucible that honed her into a figure capable of standing calmly in the face of Joni Ernst's thunder. Her preparation was not born from paranoia, but from necessity. Every folder she carried, every document she highlighted, every fact she committed to memory was part of her defense against a system eager to paint her as unworthy. Crockett learned early that the only way to silence doubt was with proof so clear it could not be ignored. That discipline became her armor. And so, when she stepped into that chamber, she did not come empty-handed. She came armed with the receipts of her preparation, the quiet power of someone who knew the truth was on her side. She knew Ernst would come swinging. She knew the accusation would be sharp, loud, and designed to humiliate. She had seen this play before. Powerful figures using volume to mask fragility. But what Ernst didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that Jasmine had come armed with more than words. She had proof. This moment was never just about two women clashing across a chamber floor. It was about the long arc of Jasmine Crockett's journey, a journey defined by being underestimated and dismissed, yet never defeated. It was about every courtroom where she stood as the lone defender of truth, every headline that sought to reduce her, every stereotype she crushed with persistence. It was about carrying that lived experience into the spotlight and showing America that dignity, when paired with evidence, is stronger than any accusation. Her authenticity was her strength. She didn't pretend to be flawless, didn't cloak herself in manufactured sound bites. She spoke directly, passionately, and with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove except the facts. That authenticity resonated with those who had long hungered for leaders who spoke not from scripts, but from scars and triumphs alike. And in that chamber, as Ernst raised her voice and pointed her finger, Jasmine's story was no longer just her own. It became the story of countless Americans who had been called liars for speaking inconvenient truths, who had been silenced for daring to stand firm, who had been underestimated until the moment they proved everyone wrong. The confrontation was personal, yes, but it was also symbolic. It was about whether politics would be ruled by performance or by preparation, by arrogance or by authenticity, by lies or by evidence. And Jasmine Crockett, with the weight of her journey behind her, was uniquely prepared to deliver that lesson. What Ernst didn't realize was that she hadn't just accused a colleague. She had provoked a fighter shaped by years of underestimation, armed with more resilience than Ernst had ever faced. And in that room, on that day, Jasmine was ready to show exactly what happens when preparation collides with projection. Because, the moment Ernst's words echoed across the chamber, the countdown had already begun, not to Crockett's defeat, but to Ernst's unraveling. The accusation did not hang in the air for long. Joni Ernst, sensing momentum, pressed forward with renewed force. Her voice rose, sharp and cutting, designed to leave no room for rebuttal. She spoke over murmurs, over shifting bodies, over the faint protest of order. Each sentence came like a hammer strike. You twist facts. You mislead. You cannot be trusted. She doubled down, confident that volume and repetition could drown out scrutiny. Across the chamber, Jasmine Crockett sat still, her hands folded, her gaze locked on Ernst. She did not interrupt. She did not flinch. Instead, she absorbed every word with the composure of someone who knew time was her ally. The contrast was striking. Ernst, with her finger stabbing the air, her voice cracking under the weight of its own aggression. while Crockett remained silent, steady, almost serene. Theatrical tension built with every exchange. A few senators exchanged smirks, assuming Ernst had landed the blow. Staffers whispered nervously, some shaking their heads, others scribbling furiously in their notes. The press gallery buzzed, reporters sensing the clash was escalating into something larger than routine sparring. The audience of America, the unseen millions watching through cameras, could feel the stakes rising with each pointed word. Ernst mistook Crockett's silence for weakness. She pushed harder, piling accusation upon accusation. You stand here, pretending to serve the people, but the truth is you bend reality to suit your agenda. The chamber stirred. The drama was escalating, and Ernst believed she had full command of the stage. But there was a shift, subtle at first, noticeable only to the keenest eyes. It was in the set of Crockett's jaw, the quiet steadiness of her breathing. It was in the patience that radiated from her, the calm of someone who carried a secret weight of certainty. For every smirk Ernst flashed, Crockett countered with composure. For every jeer implied, Crockett offered silence that was louder than words. The escalation became almost unbearable. Spectators leaned forward, unsure when Crockett would finally respond. Even Ernst seemed impatient for the rebuttal, certain that whatever came next would be defensive, scrambling, weak. She had built her persona on these moments, cornering opponents, watching them falter. But Jasmine Crockett was not faltering. She was waiting, and that wait was deliberate. Each passing second tightened the coil of suspense, each pause transforming silence into power. The chamber felt the balance begin to shift, without quite knowing why. Then came the pivot. Ernst, flushed with confidence, delivered what she thought was the final blow. You cannot prove me wrong because you have nothing. Her words rang out, bold and absolute, punctuated by the smug certainty of someone who believed the battle was won. The silence afterward was deafening. Eyes turned to Crockett. The room seemed to inhale and hold its breath. She looked across the chamber, her gaze steady, her voice unspoken but her presence undeniable. And then, without raising her voice, without a single wasted word, she reached for the folder beside her. It was a simple gesture, yet it cut through the chamber like a blade. Papers shifted, a tab flipped open, the faint sound of preparation meeting its moment. Reporters jolted forward, pens poised. Ernst's smirk faltered, only slightly, but enough for those watching closely to notice. Because in that instant, the dynamic changed. No longer was this about accusation and silence. No longer was Ernst the one commanding the narrative. And then, in a moment that would rewrite the entire exchange, Jasmine reached for the evidence. The moment Jasmine Crockett's hand brushed the folder, the entire chamber seemed to freeze. That small, deliberate movement carried more weight than any of Ernst's shouted accusations. She slid it across the desk slowly, almost ceremonially, and lifted the first page with the calm precision of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. A hush fell. It was the kind of hush that makes time feel heavy, that pulls even the most distracted minds into focus. Crockett did not rush. She allowed the silence to stretch, to build tension like the overture before a storm. Every eye tracked her hands. Every breath seemed to hold back in anticipation. Then she spoke, her tone measured, even gentle, yet sharper than any insult Ernst had hurled. "Senator Ernst," she began, "you've accused me of lying. You've looked this chamber in the eye and declared that I cannot be trusted." She paused, letting the words settle, letting Ernst's certainty echo back against her own composure. But the thing about truth is, it leaves a record. She lifted the page for all to see. Not a flourish, not a wave, just a steady presentation. It was a printed voting record, highlighted, dated, undeniable. "You claim I twisted facts," Crockett continued, "but here is your vote from last year's session. You said one thing on camera and did the opposite on this floor. The record doesn't lie." "You did," gasps rippled. Staffers leaned closer. Reporters scribbled furiously, pens scratching like fire across notepads. Cameras zoomed in on the page, hungry for detail. Ernst shifted uncomfortably, her smirk cracking into something thinner, tighter. She opened her mouth to interject, but Crockett pressed on, her calm more commanding than any raised voice could ever be. "This chamber," Jasmine said, eyes sweeping across the room, "deserves honesty. The American people deserve honesty. Yet time and again, you voted against the very principles you claim to defend. You speak of standing with veterans, yet voted against expanded healthcare for them. You speak of working families, yet supported tax breaks that left them behind. You accuse me of bending reality, but Senator, it is your record that bends under the weight of your contradictions." The words landed like blows, each fact slicing clean through the fog of Ernst's performance. Crockett's voice never wavered, never rose in anger. Her strength was in her restraint, in the confidence of someone who did not need theatrics because she held the truth. The chamber vibrated with whispers. Aides exchanged wide-eyed glances. One reporter mouthed to another, "She's dismantling her." And then Crockett laid down the second document. "Here," she said softly, "is your public statement from that same month. A statement where you told your constituents the opposite of what your vote confirmed." She slid the paper forward. "That's not my word against yours. That's your word against your record." The effect was electric. Ernst's shoulders tightened. Her eyes darted, scanning for allies, for nods of reassurance. But the silence betrayed her. The very stillness she had once owned now belonged to Jasmine. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or taunt. She simply continued, page after page, each one a receipt, each one an unshakable proof that Ernst's accusation was not just wrong but reckless. The more evidence piled, the smaller Ernst seemed to shrink, her confidence collapsing under the weight of documented truth. And still, Jasmine remained calm, almost serene. It was dignity against arrogance, steadiness against spectacle. She never raised her voice, because she didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any insult ever could. Phones lit up in the gallery. Staffers texted furiously, sending fragments of the moment across networks. On social media, clips began to circulate within seconds. One line, delivered with Crockett's unwavering calm, trended instantly. "The record doesn't lie. You did." Hashtags exploded. "Receipts don't lie. Jaya Crockett facts. Shall truth overspin?" The reaction was instantaneous. Commentators outside the chamber were already reacting in real time, their voices rising on cable panels, their tweets flashing across feeds. What began as Ernst's attempted takedown had transformed into her own public unraveling. Inside the chamber, Ernst's face betrayed her. The arrogance drained, replaced by the stiff, uneasy composure of someone cornered by their own contradictions. She tried to interject, tried to reclaim the narrative, but every attempt was smothered by the quiet authority of Crockett's evidence. The villain who had strutted into the chamber wielding soundbites now found herself disarmed, her weapon shattered by facts too heavy to ignore. Crockett closed the folder with finality, the soft thud echoing like a gavel. She didn't shout, didn't declare victory. She simply looked Ernst in the eye and said, "Accusations are easy. Proof is harder. And today, Senator, proof is what I brought." The chamber erupted, not with applause, but with the electricity of a moment everyone knew would outlive the day. Reporters bolted from their seats to file breaking alerts. Staffers whispered furiously, some with awe, others with panic. And across the country, viewers glued to their screens leaned forward, sensing they had just witnessed something rare in politics. Arrogance meeting its match in unshakable truth. Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself. She flipped the script, turning Ernst's weapon back on her, exposing the hollowness behind the bluster. And she did it with the poise of someone who knew that dignity is strongest when it refuses to descend into the mud. The silence after was not the silence of intimidation, but of realization. A shift had occurred. The chamber felt it. The nation watching felt it. In that instant, Ernst was no longer the accuser. She was the exposed. But the fallout was only beginning. Outside that chamber, the nation was already reacting. The sound of that folder closing hadn't just echoed inside the chamber. It reverberated far beyond it. Within minutes, the confrontation leapt from marble walls to glowing screens. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's calm dismantling of Joni Ernst flooded. Social media, spreading like wildfire through timelines and group chats. What Ernst had intended as a decisive strike became instead the spark of her own undoing. The hashtags arrived almost instantly. Receipts don't lie climbed Twitter's trending list within the hour, soon joined by just Crockett facts and truth over spin. Memes sprang up at dizzying speed. Images of Ernst pointing angrily contrasted with Crockett's serene expression as she held up the documents. One viral edit showed Crockett dropping the papers like mic drop confetti, with the caption, "Proof Performance." Commentators couldn't resist weighing in. Progressive outlets hailed Crockett's composure as a masterclass in dignity, under fire. Even some conservative voices, wary of being on the wrong side of the viral storm, admitted the exchange was a political gut punch. On late-night shows, comedians replayed Ernst's thunderous accusations, only to cut abruptly to Crockett's understated line, "The record doesn't lie, you did." The audience roared. Rivals who had once doubted Crockett's staying power began to publicly acknowledge her moment. A fellow representative tweeted, "This is why preparation matters. This is why truth matters." Representative Crockett just showed America what accountability looks like. The praise poured in from activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens alike, many of whom saw in Crockett's calm rebuttal a reflection of their own struggles. Moments of being accused, dismissed, underestimated, only to find strength in holding on to the truth. Meanwhile, Ernst's camp scrambled to regain control. Statements were drafted and redrafted. Aides debated whether to double down or pivot, but every attempt felt hollow against the weight of Crockett's evidence. One leaked email revealed the panic. "We need a narrative fast. This is spiraling." By the end of the day, Ernst's team released a carefully worded press statement accusing Crockett of grandstanding and taking words out of context. But by then, the context was already seared into the public imagination. The video clips had gone viral, and no press release could erase the visual contrast. Ernst shouting, Crockett proving. The shockwaves rippled across the political spectrum. For Crockett's supporters, it was validation, proof that truth could still pierce through spectacle. For Ernst's critics, it was confirmation of hypocrisy long suspected. And for neutral observers, it was a reminder of how quickly power can shift when arrogance collides with preparation. Cable panels buzzed with analysis. One commentator said, "In just 90 seconds, the power dynamic flipped. The accuser became the exposed." Another added, "This is the kind of moment that lingers, not just for its drama, but for its clarity." Americans crave authenticity, and Crockett delivered it in spades. Beyond the punditry, the grassroots response swelled. Supporters clipped Crockett's line into TikTok edits, Instagram reels, and YouTube shorts. Young activists adopted "Warner receipts don't lie" as a rallying cry, plastering it across signs and digital banners. Online fundraisers linked to Crockett's campaign page saw a surge, small donations pouring in with notes like "For the truth" and "Keep bringing the receipts." Even Ernst's longtime allies found themselves uncomfortably quiet. The silence from her usual defenders spoke louder than words. The few who did step forward offered lukewarm deflections rather than full-throated support. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Ernst had overplayed her hand, underestimated her opponent, and in doing so, jeopardized her own credibility. And yet, amidst the frenzy, Crockett herself did not boast. She issued no victory lap statement, no gloating tweet. She let the evidence and the people speak for her. That restraint only amplified her stature. To many, it underscored the very contrast that had defined the exchange. Ernst chased soundbites. Crockett embodied substance. The fallout became more than a single confrontation. It was a symbol, a parable about politics in an age of spectacle, and it left a permanent mark on both women. For Ernst, the brand of toughness cracked. For Crockett, the reputation of authenticity solidified. What had begun as an accusation ended as an inversion. The chamber, the country, and the headlines all carried the same story. In just 90 seconds, the power dynamic flipped. The accuser became the exposed. Step back from the chamber, and the confrontation between Joni Ernst and Jasmine Crockett takes on its true scale. This was never just about two senators trading barbs or one momentary clash in Washington's endless theater of conflict. What unfolded was a test of whether truth can still cut through the noise, whether dignity can still withstand arrogance, whether evidence can still outlast lies. Ernst came armed with accusation, volume, and the confidence that spectacle often prevails. For years, that strategy has defined too much of our politics. Soundbites without substance, spin without accountability. It thrives in a culture where headlines move faster than facts and anger spreads quicker than clarity. But Crockett came armed with something rarer, something that requires discipline, preparation, and courage. She carried proof. She carried patience. And most of all, she carried dignity. That is why the moment struck so deeply. Millions of Americans who have grown weary of distortion saw themselves in that exchange. They know what it feels like to be shouted down, to be dismissed, to be told their truth doesn't matter. And they know too the quiet strength it takes to stand calmly, to wait, and to bring forward the facts when it matters most. Crockett's choice to respond not with bluster, but with evidence was more than a tactical win. It was a moral one. Because politics at its best is not about who can shout the loudest. It is about who can be trusted when the shouting stops. It is about accountability. It is about truth. And when truth is presented with calm determination, It has the power to silence even the fiercest accusations. This is the lesson that lingers. Arrogance is brittle, but dignity endures. Lies may dominate a headline, but evidence rewrites history. The moment Ernst pointed and accused, she believed power lay in her volume. But the moment Crockett held up her receipts, she proved that real power lies in preparation, in discipline, in the unshakable clarity of truth. And that is not just Crockett's lesson or Ernst's downfall, it is a lesson for America. Our democracy works only when leaders are held accountable. It thrives not on spectacle, but on substance. It survives not through those who posture, but through those who prepare. Each time arrogance is met with dignity, each time lies are answered. With proof, the democratic experiment strengthens. This is why the confrontation mattered beyond the walls of the Senate. It was a reminder, played out in real time, that truth still has defenders, and that the future belongs to those willing to carry receipts, not just rhetoric. The moral clarity of the moment speaks for itself. No matter how loud the accusation, no matter how confident the spin, facts endure, evidence endures, and when those are brought to the table with dignity, arrogance crumbles. So let the lesson echo far beyond that chamber. America does not need leaders who perform for the cameras. It needs leaders who prepare for the truth. It needs voices that refuse to be silenced by intimidation and hands steady enough to hold up the proof when it matters most. Because when dignity meets evidence, lies don't stand a chance. The title told you what happened. Joni Ernst hurled her accusation, but Jasmine Crockett shut her down with evidence. Yet what played out in that chamber was more than just a mic drop exchange. It was a moral moment, a reminder that truth, when carried with courage, has the power to disarm even the loudest voices of arrogance. We live in an age where too many leaders believe performance is power. They point fingers, raise their voices, and trust that bluster will be mistaken for strength. But what Jasmine Crockett proved is timeless. Facts are stronger than spin, and dignity will always outlast deceit. That's why this story matters. It isn't just about one clash, or even about one senator standing her ground. It's about the principle that democracy cannot survive without accountability. It's about showing that when arrogance tries to dominate, preparation and evidence can turn the tide. And it's about proving that the truth still belongs to those brave enough to defend it. So here's the challenge to you. If you believe in facts over spin, if you believe that dignity matters more than arrogance, then don't just watch this moment. Be part of it. Subscribe, share this story, and add your voice to a movement that refuses to be silenced. Because when we amplify truth together, we make it impossible for lies to reign unchallenged. The room may have fallen silent when Jasmine Crockett revealed her evidence, but beyond those walls, America was listening. And so was the world. Because sometimes one moment of truth can silence an empire of lies.